we're both trying to put out information and content and help people in ways that may not even directly impact our businesses. For example, I come out hard on people on some of the big credit mistakes I see. I don't make any money because they fix their credit. That's not my business. I'm not soliciting business that way. What I'm saying is, hey, I've been doing this since 1992. I've learned some things. You know, I've been doing credit since before we had credit scores. Okay, so this is episode 4 of the Trusted Advisor Mortgages and More podcast, where we talk about financial services, mortgages, real estate, accounting, basically anything to do with entrepreneurship in any way. And here today we have none other than JJ the CPA. He is an author, he is a CPA, obviously, and an entrepreneur. Here is his book, JJ the CPA here. So here we have JJ the CPA here. And JJ, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Russ, thanks for having me on. You know, you and I have become friends over social media, and then we've had some opportunities to interact. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I think it's overdue that you would put a podcast together. I think it's going to bring a lot of value to those that are following you, and hopefully bringing some other followers. One of the things that I love about following you and seeing your posts, not only are they fun and entertaining, but they're very informative and very genuinely providing information that even if somebody doesn't call you to hire you, that you're still helping people. And that's probably why I think you and I have maybe been attracted to one another. Sounds like a strong word, but I think that's probably really what we're talking about here. And so as a CPA, I'm doing similar to what you're doing on social media, which is just providing good information out there. One of the reasons I wrote that book, which I appreciate you holding up and promoting, and you read it and you left me a wonderful review on Amazon, and I really, really appreciate that. But you know, that book that is put together is the top 60 questions in the last 26 years of practice. And it's related to banking and insurance and small businesses, as well as tax. Only about a fourth of that book related to tax, really just the last part of it. But with that being said, I am definitely not a master of jack of all trades, master of none. I'm not that. But being a CPA, a practicing CPA that's always been in the tax world, I have the opportunity to talk with my clients year after year after year, and all the different things that's going on in their lives. And then I've just been proactive with my clients in terms of asking what's going on in their, you know, financial picture. Not that I can then help them in every regard, but to put them with those that I'm working with. And that's what I like about having further connections on social media, is being able to collaborate, so to speak. So I've got a CPA practice, a traditional one, doing tax returns, tax planning. I also have a small boutique insurance practice that we only sell life insurance, whole and term, and disability income insurance. I really just focus in on helping my clients. And then I've got some other smaller businesses that are a little bit on the financial side, whether it's consulting or some funding in the legal world. And then I'm lucky enough that I get to go around the country and talk with CPAs in all 50 states on behalf of Surgent. Surgent now has a podcast that really is geared towards CPAs, but I'm one of 2 co-hosts with that as well. And I have a podcast similar to you. My podcast is not as sexy as yours, Russ, because mine's not video. Mine is just audio. And one of the things that I'm doing with it is I'm trying, we'll see how far I get with it, to just have it be when I'm with a person, like side by side, and it's on iTunes. And the last thing is I've got a song, JJ the CPA, Money Never Sleeps, and it's on iTunes, as you know. Appreciate you promoting that as well. So I'm just trying to be everywhere, having a lot of fun. I'm a spokesperson I think for the industry in general, and that's probably overall what I'm trying to do is maybe change the, maybe just a little bit, change the perspective that maybe the general public has of CPAs. And, you know, I'm that guy that typically will have a cigar with me at all times. That is not because of social media. I've had a cigar with me since before I started my career, but so that's very long-winded, but trying to do a lot of different things similar to you, and probably the top priority, it sounds corny, but it's helping people.
No, that's fascinating. And I forgot to mention the song, and I know the song because I even bought it on iTunes and made my 17-year-old listen to it, and he was not very happy with me about that. But my 17-year-old is a very serious musician.
Oh, wow.
He is looking at applying to schools for probably composing, but he's a composer, he's a performer, he sings.
That's awesome.
His senior year of high school, when most kids are taking it easy, he's taking 8 classes.
Wow.
So he's got a 0 period at 7 o'clock in the morning, and 5 of the 8 classes are music.
Yeah.
So
wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
just what his life is. And so he's very snobbish in the sense of wanting things to be very classical or pure in what he's doing. And so doesn't like the modern stuff. You know, I've told him that if you would take his talents and take it to social media, he could just take things by storm because he is that talented.
Yeah.
Awesome. But he wants to do it and talk about ancient composers and the stuff that they did and play that music and do things of that nature.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that, you know, my son's 17 as well. He's a junior in high school. He turned 5 and then started his kindergarten year. So he turned 17 and then started his junior year. Mm-hmm. But baseball's his thing. So he's 6'5". He's a lefty.
Oh, wow.
And just very serious about it. Similar, you know, on his own. He's up early, going to work out even before he has to even get there. He goes an hour early. Really wants to play baseball even beyond college. So he works really hard at it. So they probably see a couple of dads that are dedicated to what they do, that, you know, we're recording this on a Sunday afternoon in between both you and I's busy schedules. But what they see is that we love what we do, I think, and that we're dedicated to it. And, you know, you're having lots of fun. You're on TikTok and Instagram. I am too, probably not as talented as you, the things that you're coming up with and some of the videos. But nonetheless, obviously we're sending a message, I think, to our kids and probably even to the next generation. Similar, you know, when you're on Instagram and you're on TikTok, the things that you're talking about aren't necessarily what everybody else is talking about in those, and it's hitting a younger crowd. So anyways, I give each of us a little bit of credit for some of the seriousness that it sounds like our sons are taking towards what it is that they're passionate about, because we're doing that.
Yeah, and you're right. And actually, one good point that you made earlier is we're both trying to put out information and content and help people in ways that may not even directly impact our businesses. For example, I come out hard on people on some of the big credit mistakes I see. I don't make any money because they fix their credit. That's not my business. I'm not soliciting business that way. What I'm saying is, hey, I've been doing this since 1992. I've learned some things. You know, I've been doing credit since before we had credit scores.
Is that right?
And so, oh yeah. As a matter of fact, what they used to do back in the early 90s is lenders would say, okay, if you have more than 4 or 5 credit lates, we're going to maybe decline the loan, or we're going to make you explain everything. And they were doing some things that were really sketchy. Meanwhile, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac contracted with Sarah Isaac to say, okay, here's 1 million loans. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. This is what we knew when we made them. How can we use that data to determine which ones are going to be good and bad? And that's how they came up with the FICO scoring model. Okay? So what they did is, in secret, they came up with this scoring model as of the date of origination. And then Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac came to all the big mortgage bankers and said, okay, pull this file, pull this file, pull this file, pull this file, and we're going to audit them.
Oh, wow.
And that was all the ones that were sketchy on the books, and the lenders had no idea how it was that they were figuring out that these were the potential problem loans. And wow. If a lender makes a loan in the name of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, basically, they sell it to them. If they haven't followed the rules, they have to buy it back.
Oh, wow.
Which means and again, these are mortgage bankers. They don't have money on deposit to where they can be making loans. They've got to find someone to buy that loan. So if they make a big mistake, there's actually something they call a scratch and dent market, where they sell things to private investors, where they may take a 25-point hit selling a loan if they made a big mistake on it. Now, generally they're only taking 2, 3, 4, 5-point hits when they're doing these things. But if it's really bad, that's what kind of a discount they have to give in order to get that loan off their books. And their warehouse line doesn't allow them to keep that loan on the books. They have to get it off the books no matter what it costs.
Yeah.
So,
oh, wow. Well, that's not to, I'll do a shameless plug, and I appreciate it. But, one of the things, I've got a full section in here on banking that's very, very basic, as you know. But people don't understand the basics. And one of the things that, when you talk about that's interesting is that, what are the bank's goals? What would be the, institution's goal is simple. They want to get paid back. And how are they able to get paid back? Well, it's based on cash flow. And, you're going to obviously be much more knowledgeable on this, but, if there's a risk of somebody being able to pay something back, it's probably because they've got too many obligations out there. So quick question, if we're now using the FICO score and they've got now even that much more history behind it, and I know that, right now, what is it, on Capital One or Chase or whatever, I can go look for free at any moment in time, what's my credit score, and it has colors and graphs and, all that good stuff. But if somebody has too much credit, right, then they're concerned with, well, are they going to be able to, pay us back is really what that comes down to.
Exactly.
So coming out of a personal circumstance where right now I've got a little debt that I need to get paid off. And, in the mafia world, when you say, well, we got a little bit of debt, that means you usually have some debt. It's not necessarily little, but I've got some debt that I need to get paid off. And I'm figuring that, this tax season, I'll probably be able to wipe it away. But to get kind of recovered from that, the other thing is I've got a lot of credit available, and I understand that hurts. But in those two circumstances, so if my goal is I'm gonna get this stuff paid down, maybe off in the next 120 days, what else should I be doing during that time? And is there anything I can do to quicker raise my rate? Because right now I'm not, forever and ever I was in that, that top section, and I'm in the section that's just right below it, and I haven't had any issues getting my line renewed. I just got a, car loan kid.
You brought up a really interesting point there. If your credit score is coming from Capital One, that's a Vantage score. It's not a FICO score. Almost no banks of any worth use the Vantage score for any reason.
Okay.
Credit Karma and Capital One use them because it costs them next to nothing to get.
Okay.
There are some players that are trying to pressure the FHFA into allowing Fannie and Freddie to use Vantage scores if it's in the client's best interest. But for the situation you're in, your FICO scores are probably considerably higher than your Vantage scores. There have been times where I've seen my personal FICO scores be as much as 150 points higher than my Vantage scores. Because it just depends on how you're using things. And when it comes to the FICO scoring model, there's 30 or 40 different FICO scoring models.
Wow.
For example, each of the three bureaus has their own version of each FICO score that we use.
Okay.
In mortgages, we're using FICO score models 2, 4, and 5, depending on which bureau it is. So those are models that are 15 years old. And we use those because those are the ones that Fannie and Freddie's underwriting systems know how to interpret.
Okay.
So your mortgage credit score will be different than the credit score you get when you take out a car loan or a credit card.
Okay.
And there are things that the older versions of FICO treat more harshly as opposed to the new ones. For example, because of fraud and abuse and misuse in the collections arena in credit, FICO 9 just ignores any collection account if the balance is $50 or less. So it doesn't affect you. Whereas that may tank you on my credit scores by 100 points.
Wow. Okay.
But lenders also realize this, and they understand the fraud and abuse. And so they no longer make you necessarily pay off a collection to get your mortgage. Whereas we used to always have to do that. Now, the problem comes into play there that because your credit scores are lower, your rates may be impacted, but you still can probably get the loan depending on how bad things are. So as far as what you're doing, it's actually good to have a lot of credit available. If you, for example, in a situation where we have a business person who has a need to spread out a lot of debt for different reasons, one of the things that we encourage them to do is, if possible, not let any one credit line sit at over 30% of the limit, because that's one of the lowest thresholds as far as risk. And so if you have $100,000 available on 10 credit cards and 3 of them are maxed out at $10,000 and the rest are at 0, your credit will be worse than if you put every single one of them at 3.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's just one of the things that we do. But when it comes to the Vantage scores, which I think that's what Chase gives, I think that's what Capital One gives.
Okay.
Wells Fargo and Amex give true FICO scores. I know some of the credit unions I use give true FICO scores. I tell my clients that your Vantage score might as well be printed on toilet paper. That's how useful it is to you.
Okay, gotcha.
It does not paint a good picture of what's going on. It's good to keep an eye on it, just because if you see that thing start to fluctuate a lot, you may have some credit fraud happening on your credit profile that you haven't caught. So whatever scores are being provided to you for free, you should look at, but don't freak out about it if it's a Vantage score and things are lower than you think they should be. It's probably because the Vantage score is lower than it should be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And then it sounds like then, as I'm paying off this debt, and you know, I came out of a divorce in 2019 and just leading up to it and all that good stuff. But so I don't have a boat or anything like that. But what I hear you saying then is probably as I'm paying down that debt, you know, I was originally thinking like, okay, well, I'll pay this one all the way down and this one all the way down. So what I hear you saying is spread that love around and, you know, bring them all down kind of at the same time versus just one and one.
If the interest rates are comparable between them, you know, obviously if you've got one that's at 30% and one that's at 4%, you're going to throw everything on the 30. But if they're all sitting at between 10 and 15, you might want to pay them down slowly. Now, as you pay down, something that some lenders do, Chase is famous for this. As you're paying down, they may lower your limit every time you make a payment down. Well, if a lender starts playing games with you like that, stop focusing on them and focus on everything else, because they're not playing in good faith with you, and you're not going to see the benefit of what you're doing. And then my advice to people in that situation is, once you have everything under control and you pay everything off, sever all ties with that institution. They don't deserve your business.
Right. Yeah.
Chase does that. American Express does that a lot.
I happen to work clients with American Express. Yeah.
And they can just be brutal in the way they do things. And I understand that that's part of their risk mitigation and everything, but sometimes they make things worse for your clients by taking that aggressive action, because other lenders can see the history. They can see month by month by month what's happened with that card, and they can see, oh wait, that limit went from $25,000 down to $1,000 when the balance was $50. Well, obviously, they either saw a problem or they're being punitive for some reason.
Yeah.
And my feeling is any institution that will do that to you doesn't deserve your business. And once you get everything together, find better people to bank with.
Yeah.
You know,
Gotcha.
you can Google that. You can go on, there's a really good consumer forum called Credit Boards, which is much, much, much better than the forums over at MyFICO,
Gotcha.
just as far as the quality of the people that are on there and the information they have available to you. And
now,
wow,
well, and so Russ, in regard to that, with the credit cards, so, you know, I have a number of credit cards just, you know, I gained over the last 20 years, right? I mean, I have some that, like, it's the card I got when I was in college, and it only has a $2,500 limit on it, and never asked for an increase. But I had heard that if you shut down a credit card, you know, or just say, I want it closed, that hurt your credit. Is that true?
depends on the situation.
Okay.
So in general, it's a good idea to keep your longest credit card open.
Okay.
Unless it's a bad one that's charging you $50 or $100 a year in fees. The reason being is they look at the length of your credit history. Now, when you close that card, you should still get the benefit of the history for the next 10 years on it.
Okay.
But something else that comes into play when it comes to all the details they use for calculating your FICO scores, one of them is the average age of open accounts.
Okay. Okay.
So if you have one account that's 20 years old and everything else is 3 years old, and it's a lot of accounts that are 3 years old, your average age of open accounts is going to be less than optimal, and that's going to affect your scores. So it's good to keep those open. But likewise, if you have people on your credit report like Indigo or Milestone or Credit One, you want to get that stain off there, because down the road, when you're trying to negotiate a $5 million purchase of an office building, you don't want those underwriters to see that at some point you went to those banks because they think either you were desperate or you didn't know what you were doing.
Got it.
Because there are some really bad actors in the credit industry, in the mortgage industry, just like there are in taxes. I mean, you can probably name 50 of them off the top of your head that people have had problems with because they don't do their jobs right and make a mess instead of fixing anything.
Yeah. Hey, one other question. I know this is your podcast, but you know, I think with monitoring credit is and I know you're not going to be able to promote one company or the other, et cetera, but is LifeLock really the best monitoring out there? I know that they advertise the most.
They advertise a lot. I haven't used them personally, so I don't know exactly what they're doing there.
Because I have LifeLock, but I've never needed them, and they seem to have always done a good job. But there's never had to do anything. I mean,
sure. So as far as monitoring, my personal preferences are MyFICO, which is obviously owned by Fair Isaac, and Credit Check Total, which is owned by Experian.
Okay.
Both of those will check your credit every day and give you updates, I think, continuously as far as where your FICO scores are on the primary ones. When I was previously a member of each, they were giving out FICO 8s. They may have moved to FICO 9 by now because lenders are transitioning to that. And then once a month or once a quarter or something, they would give a very in-depth, hard-pulled credit report showing all the different versions of FICO scores and everything that's going on. It's a good idea from that standpoint, but you know what? The free servicing you can get from Experian or Equifax are pretty good as pertains to what they show.
Yeah.
And in general, if someone has successfully stolen your identity and is taking out credit, it's going to hit all three bureaus. It's not going to just hit one.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. Well, and that's what the reason for the LifeLock was, you know, just to not only alert, but then if there ever was, then you've got, in essence, them that up to a certain dollar amount, like $1 million or something, they'll help restore it, you know, if it's under their watch, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And I've had clients that have used them and been very happy. I've had clients who've had their identity stolen without any kind of protection, and it can be a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, I know for me, when I first started practicing, on every tax return, I had to put my social security number next to my signature. And then out with the PTIN, the preparer tax ID number. And that was maybe in the last 15 years, something like that. But yeah, so just, the last credit card I opened was 11 years ago. It was an American Express. I haven't opened any since then. I think I ended up getting a Lowe's card 5 years ago just because I got a 0%. And then when you buy a Lowe's card, you get like an extra 10% off your purchase, to that effect. But sounds like I'll just keep the cards open as I'm paying everything down. I'll do it evenly, and then down to the zero. And then as I've had to borrow money, I've always kind of spread it around the cards. And so I'll probably just keep doing that. But so this is your podcast now. What would you like to talk about, Russ? I was using it.
Well, some things that I wanted to address with you. By the way, JMac was my first episode that I did.
Oh, yeah.
And I had a list of 15 questions I wanted to ask, and we got to 2. And just went off on all kinds of other things. And actually, the reason that I decided to start the podcast is every time I talk to Justin, he really pushed that hard, saying, look, you know a lot of stuff. You've been doing this forever. You need to put this together and have some kind of long-form content to put out there because there's just so much that you can share with everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate it.
Okay, so in your case, you've been practicing for 26 years now?
Right.
Okay, 26 years. So you've seen an outrageous amount of change as far as the advances in technology and the tools that make things easier for you. Is there one thing you know now that you wish you'd known 26 years ago? Anything come to mind there?
Are you talking about on the technology side?
On the business side, anything to do with what you're doing now?
Oh, okay. With what I'm doing now, I probably would say to more, because I do it now, but when technology was coming into play, because when I first started practicing, literally that was in the first 1 to 2 years that tax returns were being prepared by softwares. And that was when you filled out a worksheet, you sent it to a company, the company put it in the system, sent you a draft of the return. But then really right after that, LaCert was one of the first on the scene where then, you could input it yourself. And I came up with a number of systems that were based on the practices that I worked at before I started my own practice. But the systems I came up with was how to organize the documents, checklists to make sure that they were complete, checklists to, ask clients questions before things were completed, and then a process on how to make sure that the tax return was finalized and then sent to the client in a very consistent manner. But on the communication with the client, I didn't really systemize that because it was just me doing it. And I did it, based on the client and their personality. And I think what I know that I'm doing now is I now have a systematic way to communicate to the client so that not only the product that's being delivered, we're still making sure it's complete, but what's being communicated to the client is consistent. And it really took it took me out of my comfort zone, because I always wanted to deliver the results personally in the sense of by phone, hey, here's where we're at, here's what we've done. And so what I've done is always with my clients, I've communicated with them throughout the year. We've done tax estimates. So when we get to tax time, more it became, okay, well, why is that different from what you told me in December, right? And not even in a negative way, but that became more the focus. And that's where then it became emotional for me to have to call and explain, okay, well, the reason the results are different is that you didn't do this, or the results are different because you made more money than we were anticipating. And so in the systematic way that I'm now communicating with the clients is I'm more communicating at year end, not here's your number, here's what your tax is going to look like, and here's what you then can do about it to make it look like this. What I'm telling the clients now more systematically is, we know you want your taxes to be down. We know we want them to be less. There are circumstances where maybe the clients are going to have more income the next year than they are in the current year. So maybe that doesn't make sense to do traditional year-end planning. So I've changed the systematic to be, here's the things you want to do at year-end, period. Not here's where you stand. If you do these things, then here's what it will look like in April, because that crystal ball is just never going to be close enough for the client. Then the systematic communication when it comes to tax time is, and it felt a little impersonal, but it's actually worked out like I had hoped. But when the return's done, we just email them the return. And in the return, I indicate in writing, here's the pages to go look at. Here's the things that affected your taxes. Here's what you owe. Here's what your refund is. Here's what we recommend. And then I have someone from my office follow up the next day to make sure they got the email. Were they able to open it okay? Did they have any questions about the explanation? And would they like me to follow up with them? So when I first started, and go for then the first 20 years of my practice, I would make that phone call during the year with specific results. I'd make the call in March or April with, here's the explanations, here's why it's different. But when I pulled back and I looked at doing it systematically and trying to make a similar experience for everybody, I think the clients like it better. They didn't have to involve me in their emotion on their taxes. And so I think as I were to roll back to my beginnings, I would have said, especially in the early part of my practice, is you're systemizing everything now. You're coming up with a way to make sure the returns are complete, that you're getting all the information and questions, but you're taking too much responsibility for that client's tax number, and you're then putting your reputation based on their emotion towards the number that you're giving them, which is nothing more than their number. So probably similar to you for us, it would be, someone calls you and says, hey, I want to get a loan in 6 months. You look at their credit report. Well, if you do these things, it should come down about 12 to, or 50 points or whatever. And then you should be able to qualify for this. Well, then when it comes time, it's like, well, you didn't do those things, so your points didn't adjust. And then, oh, by the way, this changed in your picture because you did something different, and now you don't qualify, and now the whole discussion's about you. And so my point is that in terms of business and interacting with my clients is I've taken less responsibility, but the clients are more satisfied. They're happier because I think they recognize these are more their numbers, not my numbers. And that's also changed that when I'm going through and doing tax estimates with clients, instead of arriving with the tax estimate with, here's what we did, here's where I think you're going to be, we would build the tax estimate together. And what I mean by that is, here's your net income that we know of right now. These are your numbers. Let's look at them. Now, client, hey, what do you think is going to happen between now and then? Now and the end of the year. Okay, what about your gross? Do you think your expenses are going to be the same? Okay, great. Well, based on what you're telling me, based on your numbers, then here's what the tax would look like. And then here's some things we want to do about it. But then there's a lot of clients, Russ, they're not actually interested in that. They really aren't. What they're interested in is, what can I do about it? And so I'd probably sum it up like this for whether it's a CPA or attorney or a banker or insurance advisor, an investment professional, is let the clients understand it's their numbers. And kind of what I talk about in this book, and you talked about it in your review, is I don't like working with clients that are do-it-yourselfers, okay? But also what I realized over time is that I can't be I do it all for them. They need to have a better understanding of what's going on. And that's kind of what my book's about, is giving them more of the basic information for them to feel a little more empowered that it is their information, it is their numbers. And then just mirroring that back to them asking some questions, giving them some ideas, and then if they're able to take advantage of it, working back with them to see, well, what do we want to do differently as we move forward? If they don't do something, to just say, well, when we talked last, you were saying you're going to do this or this or this, you did it. Long story short, I've become more relaxed and more systematic in the communication, which may sound like to me on the surface or in the beginning as it would be less personal. But at the end of the day, it's not. It's made it much more complete. And I think the clients feel more satisfied because they better understand their number. Because they understand, first of all, it's their number.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. And that makes sense. And it sounds like you found a better way to help them manage their expectations.
Yeah.
So that if it doesn't work out the way they were wanting, it's not your fault. It's because of the way they did whatever they did.
Right. And, clients seem to, I work with some really good clients, and I know everybody says that, but the sense that right now, I've been downsizing my practice over the last 3 years. I kind of did the final step of that this summer. And so right now I feel very fortunate that the client list that I have, there's really not one client on it that hasn't been with me at least 5 years, probably more like 10. The average client that I have on my list right now has been with me for more than 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently not taking on any new clients. And part of that is that's been the goal of downsizing, and then been the goal of doing some of these other things is to be better serving the clients that I'm already working with. And instead of bringing on more clients to make revenue that way, I'm just now diving a little deeper with each client, and to the extent that they want. So anyways, I feel like the clients are more satisfied. And then I prefaced all that to say that the clients have become a little bit more responsible in actually doing what it is that they think they need to get done, because they've helped come up with that solution versus being told the solution.
Interesting. No, that's great. I probably should have started with this, but since we just went back to some of the stuff you did in the very beginning of your career, what made you decide to become a CPA instead of doing something else?
Well, honestly, when I was in, ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to have money. It was just because we didn't have any. When I was 9, I got a paper route. But when I got a paper route, it was so that I could get extras, so my parents were taking care of the basics. I got, a pair of jeans and a pair of tennis shoes and those kind of things. But with having a paper route, then I could supplement that to get a pair of Nikes. And then once I got to age 12, I kept the paper route, but then I got another job where I just cleaned up garbage and changed light bulbs at a mobile home lot. Then I went and worked in retail and things to that effect, like everybody else does. But what I learned up until about age 16 was that by working, I could have the things that I wanted in addition to my necessities. Now, when I turned 16 and had my own car, then I started to take on some responsibilities of well, I have to work to pay for my auto insurance, and I have to work to be able to pay for gas. But then I found a somewhat entrepreneurial type job working for a real estate appraiser. And so I did a lot of legwork, but I got paid per job. So I asked, instead of getting paid per hour, because they were getting a flat fee, maybe I could get a flat fee. And so when I was 16 and 17 years old in my sophomore and junior year, and this is back in the 80s, I was making somewhere between $1,000 to $1,500 a month. And I was, maintaining high grades and all that good stuff. And so when I was looking at, well, what do I want to do, in my adult life, I got to spend time with that real estate appraiser. And it was a woman, and she had she was married, but she had a business partner that was a woman. And the two of them talked about the benefits of owning your own business, but then the pitfalls, I mean, like, you know, Russ, you and I are working on Sundays and Saturdays, but then they talk about all the flexibilities that go along with that. They talk about the opportunity to make more, but there's more risk there. And so I really got a firsthand look at being an entrepreneur. So parallel to all of that was my relationship with my grandfather, which I really only saw him once a year. But I knew that he had his own business. That's really all I knew, is that he had his own business. And when he would come to visit, I saw that he had the extras. He had the gold watch and, you know, the white shoes with the seersucker suit when he came in the summer, and he played golf. And I knew that he drove a Mercedes from when I visited with him, and he could take me to the Dodgers game, which I didn't have any of that when I was growing up. I wasn't able to participate in those kind of activities. And so when I was looking to now go into college, I thought, well, I know I want to get into business, and someday I want to have my own business, but I had no idea, Russ, what that would be. But it made sense to me that I should be around money, right? So not having any example, because I didn't know any other business owners. I grew up in an area of Seattle that, you know, it's just blue collar, hardworking, good God-fearing Americans. But no one drove fancy cars. No one had a new car. You know, everybody I worked or you know, ran with, we all had similar lifestyle, which was no one went on vacations. No parents played golf. So that little glimpse that I had became very romantic to me when I would think of what my grandfather was doing. But I saw that he must be making enough money because he has all the necessities and he also has all the extra. So anyways, when I got into college, I knew I wanted to go into business, and I took my first accounting class, and I'd always loved math, even though I don't think really math has anything to do with being CPA. Obviously we deal with numbers, but most of the things a CPA does, we do with a calculator. I mean, we're not doing statistics as a tax person, and doing, you know, what an architect would do with those kind of calculations. But I think that kind of personality and the way that the brain works, for a CPA, we like to work with numbers. With that being said, I took my first accounting class, and when I finished that first day, I went and called my grandfather and said, okay, hey, I know that you're in accounting and I know that you're a CPA. I don't really know what that means, because in college, for me, there was no internet. There was an encyclopedia on the shelf. And I never looked up what a CPA is, but there was no way other than just listening and asking questions. But what I heard from my grandfather was less about doing taxes and being a CPA. More what I heard about was, because he was a CPA, he was well respected. And then he was able to have his own business, and his own business was preparing taxes. And he talked about how he had built friendships, and he was able to help people and help them with their finances, in the sense of, if they're able to pay less tax, then they're able to have more money to do other things. And what I heard probably most from my grandfather was how he owned his own business. So knowing that I wanted extras in life, because going into college, I had identified already what kind of watch and car and things that I wanted to obtain later in life as a way to motivate myself. And, you know, I really had to escape my childhood, so to speak, Russ, in the sense that I've been removed from my home 3 times, and I had a guardian ad litem, and I had some good people in my public school that helped me get on with my college career a year early. So I skipped my senior year of high school because I needed to get out there and I needed to start making money. So when I left home at 17, skipping my senior year of high school to go to college at a school in Nebraska that allowed you to start school if you had high enough grades, or start college and if you had some kind of reciprocal agreement with the high school. Long story short, I needed to get out and make money. So I got my 5-year degree done in 4 years. I went into accounting because it was the shortest route to getting a credential versus a doctor or a lawyer. Lawyer's another 3 years, doctor's another 4 to 6 to 8. And having that credential, my grandfather had indicated, you know, in the financial world, in the business world, in the world of money, you are the doctor. You know, similar in the legal world, you are the lawyer. So when you walk in the room and you've got those 3 letters and you're a CPA, you're going to immediately command respect. That respect is going to lead to you gaining the trust of those around you. And then what do you want to do with that trust? So if people like you and they trust you, they'll hire you. Will hire you to do what? Well, it made sense to me directly. The most recognizable thing that a CPA does, even though this isn't really true, but the most recognizable thing that we do is taxes. So to me, it was a shortcut to success. Now, if you go to college and you go work for a CPA firm and get your hours and take the CPA exam and pass it and all that, doesn't sound like a shortcut, but for me, it was a shortcut. It was a shortcut to getting the extras. And then the reason I started my business is so that my CPA, tax practice is the same reason I wanted to get to a point sooner, based on my own efforts, to having the extras. And so to me, when I was 9, I learned you work to have extras. So for me, when I go to work, it is to have extras. It's not just to put a house, a roof over my head and 3 squares a day and to have something to drive from A to B. It's not just to put money aside for retirement. It's to do all those things and have the extras. And so the CPA plus having my own tax practice, I knew would lead to that because of my grandfather's example. And then it has. And so I will say this, that when it was, let's see, it was 1990, let's see, it would have been the fall of 1990, in August is when I had that discussion with my grandfather. He laid out what the plan is. Graduate, get your accounting degree, get your CPA as soon as possible, work for a large local firm that's a CPA practice so you can get into tax. And then about 4 or 5 years out, go ahead and start your own CPA practice before you have all the responsibilities of life that then prevent you later from not starting your own business. So at the tender age of 25, Russ, I started my own CPA practice. And so it was probably the best decision to make. It was rough for the first several years, but once I hit probably age 30, I know that I've made more than all those that I went to school with. I make more than a lot of the wonderful people that I went to high school with. And part of that, though, is it's because of the hustle that I've put into it. And it's because I wanted to have the extras. And one step further on that, Russ, is I wanted to have enough extras that my kids can have extras. I didn't want my kids to, even in high school, I was thinking through what I wanted my kids' life to look like, completely opposite of mine. I didn't want my kids to work in high school. I wanted to buy them a car. I wanted it to be brand new. I wanted them to sit behind home plate and get that shirt and the expensive food. And I didn't want them to get out of college and have any debt. And so I've been able to accomplish all those things. And so it's been fun and it's required a lot of hard work, but I've loved it. And so I think that for me, it was less about the CPA and it was more about picking something that allowed me to have the extras.
That's phenomenal.
Well, thank you.
I knew a little bit about the story about your grandfather. I did not know about the appraisers you worked for.
Yeah.
And so obviously that's tied really closely into what I do also. So I have some understanding about the kind of stuff you would have been doing for them.
Right.
So I find that really interesting. Got kind of an off-the-wall question here. How did you get hooked up with Surgeon to be doing all this CE type stuff and going around teaching other CPAs? Because I'm assuming it's not just getting through your required continuing education, but you're
Right.
teaching them life lessons as you're doing all of that.
Right.
What opened that door for you? What made you think that would be a good way to go?
Well, so I just do that as a pure side hustle. And I had gotten my continuing ed from Surgeon probably almost exclusively starting probably around 2007. So probably going back about 12 years ago. And the reason why was that I could get it online. And what was unique, though, with Surgeon is that it wasn't just a broadcast that was replayed and replayed and replayed. What I liked about Surgeon is that it was a live broadcast, and you have to think that was still pretty new technology going on 12 years ago. And they did have some live events that came to Oklahoma City that I attended, and I was just really impressed with the quality of it. And because it was live, even the seminars online, what I was able to get was then like cutting edge information. It wasn't something they recorded in March and just played here, month after month. And so I found it was very relevant, and they had a lot of good information. So anyway, so literally for then 10 years, just exclusively getting it as my practice grew. It was great for my staff to get continuing ed from Surgeon because they didn't have to travel somewhere or be gone for the day. They could just sit at their desk and get their continuing ed. And one day, so this would have been in December of 2017, I was taking one of their seminars, and I'm looking through the materials. And when I look up, they, at the beginning of the seminar, said, "Hey, we're looking for some presenters. And if you're interested, email this person." So I just shot for the first time, because there were some new tax laws going in play. I had just shot like 5 videos and put them on YouTube. I had never done that before. And I was sending them to my clients. It wasn't for any other purpose, but there was so much information to go over that there wasn't enough time to call clients even to say, here's what you needed to do. So I just recorded these. Anyway, so I sent those links to Surgeon, and 48 hours later, I had a contract. And they'd indicated they usually didn't work that fast. Maybe they were just being complimentary of me. But anyways, they signed me up pretty quick and had me do a webinar pretty quick after that. And I think I probably did a good job. And then before I knew it, I was signed up for, maybe around 25 courses to teach. And then that's probably about how many courses I teach in a year. This year, I'll be doing about the same between now or including 19 into 2020. But here's why I love doing it. Is talk about, this, right? If you have to teach something, you're even that much more in tune with it. And going around the country, so, I've spoken to CPA firms directly from New York to Colorado, Arizona, etc. But then also Surgeon has a relationship with every society of CPAs in America, which is a huge deal. They've been around, I think, well over 30 years. Jack Surgeon started it. So they're so well respected. And the reason they're well respected is that their content is amazing. Not saying that there's others that don't have amazing content, but the others that I've seen, it's either stale or it's just the same thing over and over. And they really do update everything. So now when I'm going around and I'm talking to either CPAs that sign up for a seminar through the society that Surgeon's providing them content, I'm also able to get ideas. And so by being a little bit conversational for the seminars that Surgeon sends me out on, I mean, I was just, Thursday and Friday, I was in Indiana and got to be in 2 different cities there. And even when I'm presenting, I presented a couple of questions of some things I was contemplating with the new law and got to get some feedback. Of course, it helps everybody. But it pays. Obviously, I could probably make more if I'm sitting at my desk charging my client, but it pays well. They cover my travel costs. They find the gigs, they book them. So I'm just the talent, and I say that and kind of having fun, but they hire really good people, and I've come across some people that have presented for Surgeon and they haven't been asked back, and that would only be because maybe they didn't get good reviews. I think Surgeon's very tolerant and open-minded, and I think they recognize there's a lot of different personalities out there. But anyway, so I've had so much fun with it, and it's allowed me to now call myself a national speaker. I'm probably going to have spoken in 50 different cities by this January or so, and it's allowed me to kind of elevate my status on social media, which I've really appreciated. And when I say elevate status, just there's a perception that's, I think, true is, well, if this person's out talking outside of his community and across the nation, and there's a group that's supporting him and putting him in front of CPAs, they must know what they're talking about. Now, don't get me wrong, surgeons coming up with the material, but I have to know it. And so what I'm presenting are classes and courses that it's what I'm dealing with. So it's taxes and partnerships, S corps and things to that effect. So it's been awesome. And I'm even more of a fan of Surgeon because I've now got to see it behind the scenes and how hard they work to really put on, you know, good continuing education to CPAs. And when I go and get to do these seminars live, to hear the people that are saying, yeah, I've been taking Surgeon for a long time. And in fact, I hear some like, yeah, I've been doing this so long. I remember when it was Jack Surgeon that used to come through town, you know, to provide the seminars. So that makes you feel good to be a part of a group that has such a good reputation.
That's fantastic. And I've always gotten the feeling when I've heard you talk about this or bring it up over this past year or so, that it was more of a hobby for you, something you do because you love doing it, as opposed to, and that comes back around to all the stuff that we're doing with the information we put out there. We're putting information out there that doesn't necessarily directly impact our businesses, but it's for the love of the game. And we get to share the things that we know and the things that we love with so many other people. And just the force multiplier that the internet is giving us in making all this happen is just crazy as far as what we're able to do with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, for CPAs, it is the place to go now. Surgeon, they just provide continuing ed to CPAs. And for a while now, they also help CPA candidates. They also help CPA candidates study, and you know, they provide study materials and motivational. So they've gotten really strong in that market. I know that there's some other great organizations out there. You know, Phil Yeager, Yeager CPA Review, and Becker and whatnot. Surgeon, I think, has a unique approach to it, and without going through what that is, but I think they have a unique approach to helping CPA candidates become CPAs. So that's the other thing I really like about this group. But then they are, and I don't know how much, Russ, they've done with this, meaning it's all fresh, but Surgeon is really expanding their brand and teaming up with another brand outside of the US in helping those become certified managerial accountants, et cetera, et cetera. So expanding on the CPA. And I've had the good fortune, not for pay yet, but I've been able to be a little bit of a spokesperson for Surgeon in that area with their new identity. And the reason I'm just saying it this way is I don't know how much they've actually released so far. So I'm kind of talking in code a little bit because I've shot some videos and I know it's out there. But anyways, they are really pursuing excellence in so many areas related to accounting, which is just awesome to be a part of.
What kind of requirements do you as a CPA have for your continuing ed? Is this something you have to do every year? Is it every 2 years? How does that play out?
Yeah. So every year we need to get it. Now, actually it varies state to state, but here's really the average, is we have to get at least a minimum of 20 hours of continuing education, but every 3 years we have to have accumulated 120 hours of continuing ed. So that comes out to 40 hours a year. So most CPAs I know, we're getting 40 hours per year so that we don't have to have a year where maybe we have to get 60 in 1 year. So it's where you could get 60 in 1 year and then have some carryover to the next year. But we have to get 40 hours, and then it has to be basically approved by your state licensing board, which every organization that provides CPE for CPAs, we're going to know that based on NASBA, and it has to be in your field. So with the CPA, they're leaving it up to you in some regards, but it has to be in your field. So for me, I have to have it in the tax area. Some states have a little leeway, like mine, where I can have, I think it's up to 8 hours a year that's not tax, so it could be managerial, but it has to be, qualified, continuing professional education. And then the other thing is out of Arthur Anderson going out of business, and Enron and things to that effect, the CPA community, the American Institute of CPAs got proactive. And so we have to get ethics. We have to take ethic courses. And I'm not sure why it's this way, but it's basically like in Oklahoma, it's 4 hours every 3 years. So I just try and get, 2 hours every year in my 40. And so now I know I'm always going to be, covered, so to speak. But I think really in the industry, that is the highest. I don't know what it is specifically in the legal and the medical. I'm sure it's very comparable. In the insurance, I have my life and disability insurance license, and every 2 years I have to get, darn it, I'm not going to know it exact, but I think it's around 20 hours every 2 years of continuing ed. But there's not a lot of good continuing ed related to insurance that I've come across. It's all pretty dry. But with CPAs in the tax world, here's why I think there's a real difference compared to someone who's not a CPA or an EA, is that the tax laws are changing all the time. So for somebody to go into tax season and they really haven't done anything except read a few articles or the instructions, while there might be a few really good, hardworking, well-intentioned tax professionals out there that don't have the credentials, I'm going to guess that most don't. I don't recall exactly what it is if you're an enrolled agent, but I do know there's requiring continuing education each year. So I've really grown to respect the enrolled agent since I've gotten on social media in the last couple of years. And really, it's just because then my awareness of what they do has increased. And when you're an enrolled agent compared to a CPA, an enrolled agent is you're, in essence, licensed to practice before the IRS. So you're taking a tax exam and, an exam that's administered by the IRS, which I think is a difficult exam. And so you're having to work hard at it. That credential's at risk if you don't do something correct. With the CPA, it's just, I don't want to say it's one step further, it's many steps further, because with the CPA, the exam is much more encompassing than just taxes. We have more continuing education. But, when you were talking about Justin McCall of CPA, JMAC, and we on our show JX4 that you've been on the show that we do weekly, JX4, one of the questions came up was, what is really the difference between an EA and a CPA? And it can't just really be because of the continuing education. I did like Justin's answer, which was there's just the effort that was put forth that far exceeds really any other credential in the business world. Everything could be argued, but he just said it's that effort, it's the extra step, it's the amount of credibility that's been given there. And so I know, I believe it's Jeremy Wells. You're familiar with him, right? So he's an EA, but he's also a PhD, and he was working on this. And in fact, it was on the episode with Jeremy Wells that he was the one that asked, what's really the difference? And I'm working towards my CPA. Is that really worth it? And of course, we said yes. So, anyways. Long story short, I'm more kind of putting all that out there for those that are listening and watching your podcast that, well, who is it that I should hire? And not to keep plugging my book, but but it's something that I put in the book. And really what it comes down to is whatever their credentials are, whatever you're hiring them for, whether it's with the mortgage or banking or your insurance, your investments, any kind of legal, whether it's your tax, what kind of experience do they have, but even secondary, in what area do they have the experience? Because we both know there's people out there that maybe they don't have the credentials that maybe the others do in the business world, but they know it potentially better than the person who has the credentials if they're really specializing in one area, just like anything else.
That's a very good point. And it's funny because in watching JMac over this year, I don't know how, but I stumbled across you guys the first time you went live with JX4 on Facebook with the first episode. And I've noticed his attitude has changed a lot this year towards enrolled agents.
Yes.
Because he had some very almost demeaning comments about them in some of the early episodes. And now I talk to him and I find out he's actually working with some now, and that they're meeting a very important integral part of his offerings to the public now. And he definitely has a lot more respect because of the people you guys have run into through the show, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That, and then just, that's why I was telling you that, my appreciation for EAs had increased while I was on social media, being on social media and just hearing more. And then you see the professionalism. And quite frankly, I don't know the statistic, but I just know personally, I see more EAs active on LinkedIn specifically than I do CPAs that are in the tax world. Now, there's lots of CPAs out there that don't have anything to do with taxes. And I'm seeing them active on LinkedIn, but I'm just saying CPAs that are in tax, you don't see a lot of them on LinkedIn or social media, but you do see a lot of EAs on there. And EAs, of course, are really just, they're only in the tax world.
That's really interesting. So, okay, you grew up in Seattle.
Yeah.
Went to school in Nebraska. Why Oklahoma City? What made you decide to land there?
Yeah, so actually a little bit more expanded there. I was born in California, lived there for 5 years, and under some not very good circumstances, my mom took me from my family. So I grew up only knowing my grandfather. He was the only one that knew where we were. My mom is bipolar 2 and really convinced herself that there were people after us. And so I grew up actually Joshua Crane. It wasn't my legal name, it was an assumed name. And that was part of the escape of kind of getting out my childhood. And so anyways, when we left California, we went to Oregon, and my dad's family was trying to figure out where I was. And so in the middle of the night, we then moved again up to Yakima, Washington. In the middle of the night, we moved again to Seattle and had a double assumed name. To the outside world, we were the Erolds. And then at school, we were the Cranes. But all the while, I was Joshua Jenson. So anyways, when I left high school a year early, and Dr. Pauline Klein, the principal that was instrumental in my high school and getting me out, Nebraska was a great place to go because it was very, very, very far away. And the school that was there was related to the church I went to at the time. And I went there on a baseball scholarship, an academic scholarship. And so then that was just a 2-year college. I was so gung-ho that after 1 year of college, I had already completed a year and a half of credits, because I was taking 21 credits a semester and took a Maymester. So I couldn't go the second year to that college because it was just a 2-year. Otherwise, it just be a waste. So then I went down to Abilene Christian University in Abilene, Texas. It was a sister university to York College, where I went in Nebraska. Graduated there. As I had said, I got through my overall degree in 4 years. Started my career in Dallas, it being a place that would recognize Abilene Christian University, which is now in NCAA Division II. But then with Oklahoma, at the time, my in-laws had lived in Oklahoma City. And so while I was going to Abilene Christian University, and then started my career in Dallas, was there for 4 years. So for 7 years, I was up in Oklahoma City for every holiday. And if there was time and playing golf and all that kind of good stuff. So when I was looking at where did I want to start my practice, I'd gotten to know some people in Oklahoma that were probably 30 years my senior, about kind of the atmosphere in the business world and the political atmosphere of Oklahoma City. And talking with my grandfather, it sounded like it would be a better pond to be in because it would be smaller than Dallas to start my own practice. So when I moved to Oklahoma, it was really with it in mind that it would be a good place to start my own practice because it's a smaller community, a friendly community as well, very genuine. And so because I'd gotten to know some people, and then that was very instrumental. Russ, when I moved to Oklahoma City, it was in June of 1996. I started my practice in May of 1997. So I was only at the CPA firm in Oklahoma City for about 9 months. And my daughter was born in 1997, January of 1997. And that CPA firm, which is a wonderful CPA firm, but they were telling me when to be at work, when I could take lunch, when I could go home. But you know what? That's just what an employer does, right? But that's what made me go, you know what? That's it. This is going to be my last tax season working for somebody else because I don't want someone telling me when I get to see my daughter. And so it probably pushed me out for sure, but I was already planning on opening my practice sometime in my 20s, but that really then pushed me. And I then really had to think very strongly because my grandfather had said, you know, once you start a business, especially a CPA practice, you can't really move unless you want to completely start over. And so anyways, Oklahoma City was really a place where I had good base of contacts and people were helpful. And it's really worked out well because I'm in May of 2020, I'll celebrate 23 years. And there's a core group of gentlemen, Jason, Jerry, John, and Tim, that were an instrumental part that we were all the same age, all starting our careers in banking and legal and insurance and investment parts. And we've all grown up together and had kids together and vacation together. And we're all still clients of each other and refer business back and forth. And so really it was just a great decision to be here in Oklahoma because I think that really led to the success that I've had and the relationships in Oklahoma City. What's interesting is in following the model of my grandfather, right? So my grandfather passed away when he was 74, which was 9 days after my CPA practice opened in May of 1997. But it was an old school model. It was a traditional CPA firm model, the things that he was telling me and teaching me and how to bring in clients. And Oklahoma City is old school, and it was a good place to create a practice that was similar to my grandfather's. Not to say that I couldn't have done it elsewhere, but I do think it made it. I don't want to say easier, but I was able to be much more successful, maybe sooner, and especially with these good relationships with these guys that we're still friends. We still talk to each other, and like I said, are clients and refer. So Oklahoma City's been great. As you can see, Russ, starting at 9 years old with that first paper route, I wanted to put myself in a position to have extras for my kids. And so that actually had a determination of even being here in Oklahoma, cost of living being less, et cetera, et cetera.
That's fantastic. I love that. So I know we're running a little long here. I hope you can give me just a few more minutes. I got a couple other questions.
Yeah.
So at what point did you decide to branch out and start offering the life and disability insurance? Because a lot of CPAs are very much in their box and all they're going to do is taxes and bookkeeping or whatever they decide to do as far as their specialty, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten some resistance from some people when I'm trying to show my extended business opportunities to them. So what made you decide to jump into the insurance?
Yeah. Well, it was really to just protect my clients. And so if you can't beat them, join them. And so one of the great relationships that I started when I first started my practice, actually about a year before I started my practice, was with a good friend, Jason Claiborne. And he was a financial advisor, but he was a big fan of insurance. And so when we were trying to bring in business together and we'd go on road trips to, northwestern Oklahoma, and it'd be a 4-hour, trip up there and back, each way 4 hours. And so we would talk about philosophies and things we were learning. So right off the bat, I learned the importance of life insurance and disability income insurance and how it helps protect you from losing other assets if something were to go wrong. And with that being said, he, though, started to deal more just on the investment side, did a little bit of the insurance. And then as I gained other investment professionals, relationships, they had their insurance license, but they didn't really do anything about it. But Jason Claiborne, the one that I just told you about, I had a client who was a dentist, and he was younger than me, so he's a younger dentist and had a young family. He had bought out a practice, and he was opening a second location. And I knew that he did not have hardly any life insurance, maybe $50,000. And he was really resistant to it. I got to know his dad, who I grew to have a relationship with. But his dad was not a fan of life insurance either. So long story short, I got him in front of Jason Claiborne. Jason was able to get him life insurance, convinced him. And 6 months later, he was killed in a car wreck. And in fact, his dad, Dick, I was Dick's third phone call to tell me about David passing away. And then David's wife, Stacy, I was her fifth phone call to let me know that David had passed away. But the calls were, can you come? Can you come to the practice? And then when Stacy called, she was like, can you come to the house? She didn't even know I was at his practice. And it was not so much about the life insurance, but it was, what do we do now? Like, where are the bank accounts? There's almost kind of a weird instant reaction when people are faced with this, and what is their biggest fears? They're almost not ready to deal with the fact that someone just died, right? So what then comes rushing into their mind that they can deal with, which is, where are the bank accounts? What do we need to pay? What should we do now? So I was brought in and was immediately pulled into helping this family that I'd just been helping with their taxes and helping the parents. And I really learned even that much more how much I needed to make sure that my clients were covered. And with my friendship with Jason, for a whole host of different reasons, he really kind of got out of the business. And I really couldn't find anybody that was then properly wanting to know. And so I really got interested in, well, how do we know how much someone needs for life insurance? Like, there has to be a calculation. Like, it can't just be what feels good. Like, how do you know how much you need? So in that pursuit, no one could tell me, right? So I'm looking, came up with my own ideas. So I brought somebody in-house to start doing insurance that was related to Mass Mutual. And it didn't work because I didn't even like how they were interacting with the clients. And so I got my own license in 2016 to then just start offering it to my clients directly. And so it was really out of a responsibility, Russ. It was, don't get me wrong, it was in part that, if I'm going to recommend to a professional, if I'm going to send my client to a professional to get life insurance, is like, wow. Whoops, that's my, I got 10% left on my phone battery message. But anyways, first of all, it was like, well, why did you get that much life insurance, client? Well, I don't really know. Well, we need to figure out how, because I don't want you to buy something you don't need, or I don't want you to buy more than you need. And then from there, it was like, well, now I knew how much the client needed. So if I'm telling the client, well, hey, let's real quick calculate how much life insurance you need. Okay, now go see such and such. They just do it and be like, well, how much commission did they get? That's just not fair. Like, I did all the work.
Sure.
The client's trusting me and my analysis. So it did take me a while to get comfortable with the fact that I was getting a commission that clients knew that I would. But now I look at it as the clients don't care. They're happy that I'm getting a commission. They're just happy that someone is on their side and is helping them determine something that's not based on emotion, because it's not an emotional decision. And, you know, in my book, I talk about it at length, but there's really 3 things to look at to know how much you need. You know, how much debt do you have, or how much debt do you think you could have at some point in life? You know, what is the legacy money that you want to leave behind? You know, call it $100,000 a kid for education, $25,000 a wedding, right? Pretty simple. And then the one that is, you know, everybody thinks of is, okay, well, but how much needs to be there so that whoever's left behind doesn't have to go back to work, or not as soon? Well, it's the rule of 200. It's a crude rule, but what do you live on times 200? That's how much principal you need to then generate on an average. You know, if we look at an average amount that could be earned 6%, then that principal times 6% is going to yield whatever it is that they live on. So debt plus legacy plus what you live on times 200, that's how much you need. The other thing is, you know this, right? It's like, well, I made a decision on how much house I'd like to buy, Russell. You go, great. Now let's see if you qualify for that, right? So we need to know how much you need, but we got to, well, what do you qualify for? And then if you qualify, what's your rate? You know, what's your rating? So what I tell clients is, let's really quickly decide how much you need, but you have to go through underwriting and see if you can even get covered, number one, and number two, if you can, what's the cost? Because many people think, oh, I'm going to go to a website, I'm going to say I want 100,000, I'm 38 years old, here's the cost. True, if you meet that rating that they're giving you the example of.
Sure.
So then I just looked at it also as like, well, this is just getting the client to go get the exam. And now here I am. So the first year that I was in practice, and I'm a Mass Mutual agent. My agency, I work out of the Mass Mutual agency in Oklahoma, but I have access to every insurance company out there that provides life insurance, except maybe 1 or 2. So when I'm looking to get term life insurance for my clients, we're going through Mass, but then I price it with every single company to make sure we're just getting the best deal. But Mass Mutual's brought down their rates several times in the last several years. And then if it makes sense to have some kind of whole life insurance in their picture, and then disability income insurance. So I was number 8 in the country in 2017 with new agents at Mass Mutual. And really it was just because I was just sitting around and having a conversation with my clients, and I wasn't trying to sell them anything, and it's worked out. And so it's been a nice supplemental, but the real short answer there was I got into it to protect my clients, not only to make sure they have enough life insurance, but to kind of protect them from other life insurance agents that aren't really professionals, or they're dealing with an investment professional that has life insurance licenses, but they're not really specializing in it, and they're not really, approaching it the way that they need. And if I really go to the root of it, it was because I was the 3rd call for a dad and the 5th call for a wife as it related to life insurance. And I was so glad that Jason was able to talk David into getting $1 million of life insurance 6 months before he tragically died.
That's amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and it is very rewarding, because I've grown to see it as, by getting somebody properly insured, it's life-changing for that family if something were to happen.
No, it definitely is. And you can make an impossible time at least a little bit easier to get through.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
JJ, I've kept you a lot longer than I intended to, and I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on.
Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
I don't think so. I've really enjoyed it, and I've appreciated the opportunity to share me and my story. I know we got to visit a little bit before. I appreciate you sharing some good information at the beginning. All I can say is that for those that are listening to and following your podcast and your content, just know that you're lucky to have come across Russ, and Russ is interacting with good people. I'm honored to be, I think, part of that short list of those that he's collaborating with. And so all I would say is I look at this as a way to be a part of your, you're a center of influence. So for those that are tuning in that know Russ, I'd love to be a part of this, a part of what you're putting together here.
Thanks. By the way, any update on your next book coming out? I know you've been working on that one for a while.
I have, and bottom line is yes, there is a very intentional strategy on the delay, and the reason that I actually came out with this one first, but I'm going to have to just leave us in suspense, because after tax season is actually when all of that will roll out with quite a bit of effort, and we're going to see that my social media content is going to start to really zero in on that new book. But I will say it is cracking the CPA code, and it is how to do business with a CPA. It's the opposite of what everybody's talking about, meaning everybody out there is trying to help a CPA do better, gain business, practice better. There's no one out there telling everybody else how to do business with my kind. So the fact that I've been a practicing CPA as long as I have, I've seen it from the side of people trying to do business with me, investment advisors, bankers, attorneys, insurance professionals. But when I became an insurance professional and I tried to do business with other CPAs, I got the same door slammed in my face, even with CPAs that I have known. So I've seen it from both sides. So here's the deal, Russ. If one professional could gain one good relationship with one CPA, the amount of business they could get from that one relationship you were talking about, that's even that small practice, that solo practitioner, could be career changing. How do I know this? Jason, Jerry, Tim, and John, going back now almost 23 years, and how we have all had huge impacts on each other's businesses. And in part, they have had a huge impact from me because of my influence with my clients. So cracking the CPA code, and I've been I've been teasing that this book's going to come out, but I haven't hit the thresholds and the other goals that I needed to hit in terms of reputation and followers. And so in the meantime, I came out with this book to help really position to the rest of the professionals out there of the difference of JJ the CPA. And if you'll notice, this is a book about business and insurance and banking and legal, because those are the industries that I want to go help do business with me. So that's why this book came out first.
Perfect.
To establish me as a center of influence with a group of clients that see me for tax, but I want the professionals to see me as that full rounded CPA that's helping their clients get to work with their other advisors in a much better way. And that's why this is not a do-it-yourself book, as you put in your review. It's how do you do business better with the current advisors that you have. And if you'll notice, at the beginning of the book, I spend a decent amount talking about how to make sure you get a good advisor from banking and business and legal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this was very calculated to come up with this book before the other one. So I put out this thinking that this was going to be my second book. So anyways, more to come on that, but thank you for asking.
Beautiful. Well, thanks again for your time. And when your next book comes out, I'd love to have you back to talk about it, because that topic is, as you know, fascinating to me.
Well, I really appreciate it. And thanks so much. And thanks for everything that you're doing. And thanks again for all the support that you provide to me and Amanda and JJ the CPA.
My pleasure. It's been an honor.
Same. Thank you so much.
Thanks.